Welcome to the Mojo AI podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Panting, also the director of marketing here at Mojo AI. Typically on these podcasts, we stick to safety topics. We like to talk to different safety pros out there to get their take on different issues. But today we're doing something a little bit special. Today we've got the CEO and COO of Mojo AI, Cory, Linton, and Manoj Perumal. And today we're going to be talking about kind of the business side of Mojo AI, a little bit about startups, a little bit about AI to get their perspective on the history of the company and where they think we're going. So to start, Cory, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in tech?
Yeah, always loved tech. I was a Latin major who did computer programming outside because I hated a computer programming class I took in college. And then I went to business school, then I went to Microsoft. So I was not a developer at Microsoft, but I was in marketing and always loved tech. And then came to an ed tech software company here in Salt Lake and then Mojo. So I've really only had 3 jobs in my life.
That's interesting. Manoj, what's your background, education wise, work wise, and what brought you to Mojo AI?
I'm like opposite to Cory. I started coding microprocessors, microcontrollers. I studied electronics and communication. But right after my engineering school, I went and worked for a couple of banks, just architecting and then developing software systems for banks. And then did business school because I was always interested in, okay, what's the other side of engineering? So I joined Cory at the tech company and then worked for a few other companies in the Valley here before getting into Mojo.
Okay. Cory, prior to Mojo AI, School Improvement Network, was that a company that you started?
No, I joined it. It was actually a company my parents had started. I was at Microsoft. I went to Microsoft after graduate school and then came down to School Improvement Network. And yeah, so my parents had started it and then my brothers and I took it over.
Okay, that's interesting. So tell me a little bit about how Mojo AI started. It wasn't originally called that.
No, it was not. Manoj and I would have long walks in downtown Salt Lake around this one coffee shop. Robbie, yeah, we talked a lot. We both wanted to do something. So we were selling School Improvement Network and kind of thinking about what's the next phase. And we had lots of ideas. And I'm a closet data geek. I have no data credentials whatsoever, but I do have about eight patents with my name on that are data related. And like I said, I'm a total uncredentialed data hack. But I really wanted to do something. AI has always spoken to my soul. I love big data and what you can do with it. And so really it was starting an AI company for me. And we started in ed tech of how do we measure engagement of students to better assess student learning. That's how it all started. That originally was what Edify was.
Okay. Manoj, were you part of Edify from the beginning, or did Cory start it and then he somehow tricked you into joining?
He was officially part of it at the beginning. It's just that he had certain requirements he had to work with his visa, and I was able to be unemployed for a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I don't even want to go back to those.
I know
4 years of it, but yeah, no, like Cory said, those conversations, I don't know, we talk about all kind of stuff. Never, as far as I remember, never it was like, we have to start a company. It's always conversation about like 100 different things.
It was an ed tech focus.
Yeah.
But dabbling in a whole lot of things for a couple of years.
And
Trucking, HR,
exactly. Corporate employee,
automobile dealers, employee engagement. It was all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah. But to Cory's point, patents aside, he always is inside something about numbers, right? Whenever you cross across the screen, there is a spreadsheet or a PPT he's working on, right?
That's true. I have noticed that.
So, let me tell you kind of how we got into safety.
Yeah, that was my next question. You started in ed tech and maybe a dozen other things. What brought you to safety and what did that look like?
So my wife, Lisa Linton, she deserves all the credit for this. So we had moved into a new neighborhood and she invited all the neighbors over. And at this point we were working on employee engagement and leveraging data to measure engagement. And so one of our neighbors, we were just sitting in our kitchen talking and he was curious about what I was doing in software. And he said, have you ever looked at safety? And I said, I don't even know what that means. I honestly don't. I had no idea safety was even a thing. And he said, it's actually a really big deal. And I'm like, what do you mean? He said, safety is all about engagement. It's all about engaging people in their work so they have a safety mindset. And that was the first time I had ever even thought about safety. That was in 2019. And so that's where it started. And then I met with him. He was at a company locally called Brahma Construction, and they had a very active safety department. And he was really fascinated with the idea of using AI to improve safety.
So safety specifically in construction, was that the focus?
That was the focus.
Not a broader safety.
No, it was very much in construction, which a little more broad is high risk frontline workers. Yeah. And it was fascinating to me because like I do love data. And what I saw in safety was, wow, they are gathering just thousands and thousands of data points on paper forms. They don't do anything with it. That data has got to be, there's got to be a better way to get it and to leverage that data.
Manoj, what were your thoughts on it at the beginning? Was it an aha moment for you when safety came up?
No, I still remember. I think Cory called me and then he was talking about safety, and I was like, pretty much like, Cory, first time.
What the heck is that?
Exactly. I was like, I thought safety in this industries are all about you take care of yourself, right? I did not know safety is a thing, and I was like, okay, let's.
Manoj and I are easily excited and interested in just about everything.
Yeah, I can vouch for that in the 2 years that I've known each of you.
Yeah, no, that was my first thoughts were like, okay, it sounds interesting. Let's explore more.
So Manoj and I have worked together a long time. And you know that I am easily excited. And Manoj has learned to, okay, Cory, that sounds good. Sometimes he applies a little more rigor to making a decision than I do. And that was probably one of those cases. I got to think about this a little more. I'm like, I'm all in, let's go.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the challenges of starting a new company with new technology, AI, and trying to apply that to a space where you're both new to that space. What were some of the big challenges that you faced early on?
Oh, huge challenges. I had no credibility with construction workers, like zero. So I just dug in, and I remember in the early days, we started trying to build some software for Brahma, and it was going a little rough. But during that time, I started working with some other companies. I went out on site with some different groups, and every chance I could get to go out on a project, I took advantage of it. And that was really helpful, but I still wasn't quite there.
Focus was big. Also, with the very limited resource that you have, building something and at the same time, like making sure you're not off on meeting the expectation and then finding somebody who's willing to pay for what you're building is, in my mind, like that was like the biggest challenge.
Yeah, that's a challenge for every startup is how do we make money with this? How do we get people to
It is at the end of the day, really the only challenge that matters. There's a lot of problems you can solve that nobody's willing to pay for, and a lot of startups that solve problems that nobody's willing to pay for.
So talk a little bit about Meta.
I was working with Brahma. We were trying to build software. We were having challenges with it. And again, my wife, she sold a bed on Facebook Marketplace. And a guy came and bought it, and we're loading the bed in his truck, and we're just doing small talk. And he said, what do I do? I said, oh, I'm in software. And he said, what kind of software? I said, oh, safety. And he goes, oh, really? He said, I'm a safety manager down at the Facebook data center. This was before they were called Meta. And I said, oh, I didn't even know there was a Facebook data center in Utah. Hey, come down and show us what you've got. Then we got introduced to a gentleman, Chris Morgan at Facebook, who had started a software company many years before called Safety Mojo. And Chris introduced me to the folks at Safety Mojo. Well, I started talking to them. It was owned by a construction company, Griffiths Construction in Southern California. And they were actually trying to figure out what to do with it. What was interesting to me about it was Facebook was interested in using it in their data center program. Well, I became just hyper laser focused on, we got to get that thing. For two reasons. One, we were struggling building our own software. And two, of course, it was Facebook.
Yeah. How do you say no to that?
Yeah. So we took about 9 months, but we got it. And that really became our core product. But during that time, I started working with the Facebook data center, and I started going down every morning to their safety meetings, which were at 6 a.m. And this data center is about an hour and 15 minutes from my house. So it was brutal. That was probably the greatest thing I ever could have done, because I started to really understand, what do these guys go through? What does safety really mean? How does it really mean to be engaged in safety? And realizing how difficult these environments are, how chaotic they are. And COVID hit right in the middle of all this. Fortunately, the group I was working with down at Facebook, the whole site shut down except for 200 people. And the people I was working with were part of the ones who were there. I really got a very real sense of, what is it like to be on a construction site and think about safety.
Were you at a lot of those morning safety meetings too?
No.
Manoj?
It was all Cory. Cory and all the fun. I learned from Cory. No, for me, the learning actually started around June 2022 is when I started going to some of these. Meta helped me understand like what is safety and how big these construction are, like how, what do you call it, the organized chaos. It's like 100, 200 different companies, people from these companies coming in, working at the same time, making sure they're all safe. And then how these different processes that they follow are helping them, and how our product can help run these processes like really well. So that's how I learned safety.
And we were really lucky to be introduced to Facebook, because Facebook runs one of the largest construction programs in the world with their data center construction program. And it's also one of the safest. They have metrics that are just off the charts, and they have a very big belief in safety. So there's a debate in the industry of safety coach or safety cop. Safety cop is, I just busted you, get off the site. I have a good friend who works in data centers. He had a guy who was sitting up on the top of a little A-frame ladder for about 1 minute. The data center owner, who's another large tech company, not Facebook, called the head of the company, said, your entire company is off the site immediately. You all walk off. You're not allowed back here till tomorrow morning. I said, wow, has this happened before? He said, first time ever happened. That's safety cop, right? I bust you and I get you in trouble. Facebook very much has a safety coach mentality, which is, we're in this together, and hey, we're going to have problems. We're going to make mistakes, but we're going to work together to get around it. And it really reflects in their culture. And this is really driven by Chris Morgan and Chris Sarvis, who run the safety program, creating this culture, this positive culture of safety. And it's really, the fruits of that have really been borne out in the success of that program.
Talk a little bit about developing a product that uses AI. How difficult is it when AI is such a vague, at times complicated, at times rapidly evolving thing? Like, what are the challenges of being a startup developing with AI?
I actually have no idea. We just threw AI on there and it seemed to get attention. So no, all kidding aside, it's actually an interesting question, because for the first few years, we were trying to build our own AI models, and we were having struggles building just software that was usable, let alone AI models. We hit one dead end after the other. And it was really with the advent of large language models and being able to leverage those, that really opened up a lot of doors. I want to just mention one thing, that a good friend of ours who actually passed away this year, he was an AI pioneer. And he's the guy who taught me about AI in a real way. His name was Kurt Dobson. His first AI project was building optical character recognition on a supercomputer in the 1970s. So this guy was like very smart, but he's the one I really learned about the power of AI. But we were really struggling for a lot of years until the large language models came out.
OCR, that's the technology in scanners. When you scan a document, and it will recognize
exactly. It
the
turns out
text
in
in it.
text.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which now you can do on your phone. But back in the 70s, it took a supercomputer.
Yeah. Manoj, had you worked with AI at all prior to Edify and Mojo AI?
Like today, what we see, a large language model is what we, general public, we think as AI, but it has evolved for like decades, right? So I have been part of those in the past, but to Cory's point, the way we look at AI is I have a different spin to it. We don't look at, can we throw AI into this mix? The way we have always looked at it is, here is the business problem, or here's a challenge on the field for our users. How can we solve that problem? And if AI can help us, we use AI. And that's the difference, right? Like and then every week there are a bunch of models coming in. They do things in a different way, right? If anybody chases behind that, you'll never do anything. Whereas the way we approach is, again, the business problem, which one will help us solve that problem, or what will help us solve that problem really well? And then that's how we're managing this.
It was interesting because for a while we were trying to build our own models, and that's just crazy today because the billions of dollars being spent on these models, like we can't compete with.
Yeah.
But once we started leveraging the models out there and leveraging the tools, that's when things really picked up. And now what's interesting is we're looking at all this, and now we're starting to prototype actually taking some of these models and highly customizing them to where they are our own models. So it's coming full circle.
So throughout your time at Mojo AI, have you developed your own formula or process at a startup of how do you make a decision on what to focus on?
So look, it's hard. I think we've gone through a really important inflection point here. The first couple of years of Mojo was like, anybody who will pay me money to build something, I'll do it. And we dabbled in trucking and HR and all kinds of things. Then we got focused on safety. But it was still, what's our niche? Safety is a big, massive market that impacts over 50 million workers in the US and hundreds of millions worldwide. You could pick 10 sub-verticals in safety, each of which are multi-billion-dollar markets. So where do we focus? Wherever somebody's going to pay us money, that's where we'll focus. And we've done that for a while. And you actually, Jeff, said some things to me about 6 months ago that really haunted me. What I got out of it was, I don't feel like I know the direction we're going, and I feel like none of us are aligned. And you probably didn't say it quite that bluntly, but it literally haunted me. And we've gone through this exercise of really trying to get ourselves aligned and focused. I actually feel like we're more focused now than we've ever been. So it's hard. And for an entrepreneur, in the beginning, it's like, I'll focus wherever somebody will write me a check. But that works in the early days, but that doesn't work to build a really sustainable company that's going to be big. So I feel like we've gone through this major change in the last few months where we are getting more focused.
Like you said, in the early phase of the company, it is like check. Like if you can sustain for a while, it's totally fine. But then to scale, you have to figure out what is the most important thing that a bigger group of companies are willing to pay you, and that will help you to sustain as well as scale.
And actually a smaller group of companies to be more focused.
Yeah.
What we've done is we've really narrowed our focus.
Yeah.
A lot. And I think that's really important for where we're at right now.
Manoj, can you speak to a variation of that and maybe on the product development side? Like throughout your career in software, have you come up with maybe an internal system of evaluating potential work that could be done on a software product? Like, how do you make decisions on the product development side on where to focus and how to prioritize work?
It probably comes down to what we discussed, right? And that there are multiple factors, right? And it also depends on what phase your company is in, right? Always, the one thing like Cory and I have talked about is only when you don't have a ton of stuff to work on, you should be worried about, right? You always have a ton of stuff to work on. Now it's all about, okay, where are we as a company? Where do we want to be in the next year? And are you focusing on revenue? Are you focusing on market share? Are you focusing on both? How are you going to balance that? And to achieve what you want to achieve, what do we have to like ship in the next three months, 6 months, 1 year? And then having a company like ours, we're a small company, right? Like having the key stakeholders in the company aligned on that, focusing on that is what will help us to reach the results that we want to accomplish.
I like that answer. What are your thoughts on the startup culture in Utah? Do you feel like this is the best place you could be?
Yeah, I think Utah has a great startup culture, right? There's a lot of people here who are intrigued with startups. Hiring your people at a startup is really critical, and it's not for everybody. But there's a lot of people here who want to be a part of a startup. There's a great ecosystem of investors and just all kinds of events. Now, some of it to me is a little overdone, but it's net good, if that makes sense. There are a lot of events and a lot of things you can go to get support and to meet people and to network. And I don't think it's to where the Bay Area is, but it's getting there.
I love the entrepreneurial spirit of Utah. I believe we have a phenomenal group of people here. I'm always like surprised by different type of companies coming out of Utah in different space. So
Strong work ethic.
like hardworking people. I believe Utah has a phenomenal culture here.
What is your favorite thing about working at a startup, and what is your least favorite thing? Cory, you can go first.
All right, I gotta think for a second. Favorite thing is just the energy and the excitement of, hey, we're building something that's really significant. I love what I do. I love the people I work with. I love that we all dream big. That's a lot of fun. The worst part of working in a startup is, how am I going to make payroll next Friday? And it's a very lonely place because you don't really want to share with your employees that, hey, we might not be able to make payroll next week. So sometimes it's lonely, but yeah, it's a grind and it's hard, but it's a lot of fun. But yeah, the worst thing is just the stress. But I also believe we either make this work or we sink. And that's pretty darn motivating. I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And I've had people say, oh man, if you exit someday, are you going to just do startups? And I said, I don't have any desire to do a startup again. It's too stressful. But I also think if you didn't have to do it, would you really be willing to do what you have to do it? And I don't know.
Manoj?
The exciting part of startup is everyday challenges, right? I don't know. It depends on what type you are. Specifically for me, the challenges every day, like figuring out product, figuring out pricing, figuring out selling. I don't know whether I can live outside this. The worst part of it is, like Cory said, like very rarely there is a level of stress, which is, I don't know, once in a while you think that is worse. Next day, it's all fine.
It's true. There have been multiple times, not as much recently, but in the early years where I had to pay people within 2 or 3 days. And I remember one time I had $800 in the bank account and somehow we got through it. I don't even remember how. It's just a big black memory, but somehow you make it. That also builds a lot of strength and confidence that, okay, I made it down. We'll figure this one out. And it's easier now in the sense that I have more confidence that we'll get there just because I've been through a lot of challenges and I see the opportunities, but it's just as stressful, just in different ways. But honestly, I love it. I would not do anything else. Like Manoj,
Yeah.
there's no way I could do anything else.
Do you think you have to be an optimist to succeed in the startup world?
You almost have to be out of reality because the odds tell you that you should fail at so many points that if you take that stuff too seriously, I don't know how you survive. Yeah, I'm an optimist to a fault, and I think it's powered me through a lot.
Manoj, do you feel the same way?
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. If you're not, it's not for you.
There's a lot of failure. Like I know, look, hey, we got this cool office and Mojo AI, and we have these big clients. What you don't see are the potholes and the dead ends and having people quit that you didn't expect to quit and having a new release come out and it completely blows up in your face. We've gone through every one of those things multiple times. And those are all really hard. And some of them are, when you having big customers like Meta is fantastic. But when something goes really south and Meta's really upset, that's really stressful.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll stop telling everyone that I'm a pessimist.
Jeff, I think we're fully aware of that. But you know what? But to that point though, like one of the things I really love about our company and people is, yeah, I'm an optimist to a fault. And I value that you have different views on things. And I really value that we have a lot of people who look at things really differently than I do. I'm a ready, fire, aim person. In the early days, that might have been good, but right now it can cause some problems. And so Manoj is a little more balanced, but we have other people who are ready, aim, fire. And I think that tension and those different viewpoints, I think it's really important.
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer that we need all of that.
Where do you see the biggest changes or advances in AI within the next 12 months? Just not specific to Mojo AI or safety, but just in general.
Well, when you got literally hundreds of billions of dollars going into developed technology, who knows? But the way the models have advanced, it's incredible. And we're close to the data center space, the infrastructure being built. Like, I say this jokingly, but only half jokingly. Our grandkids are just going to jack into the matrix. Call it good. Because the power of computing, AI is getting exponentially more powerful. So that's good and bad, like any technology, right? The ability to create a fake video that looks incredibly real. You can already do that, but it's getting easier and easier all the time. I think AI is going to impact every part of our lives. I really do. Hopefully for net good, but it's going to impact everything.
Yeah. To me, what I'm looking forward to is basically these models like thinking window and how we can go manipulate that window is what I'm looking forward
that's
to.
a really good point.
Yeah. And that's coming along. But for example, DeepSeek made a inflection point of how the thought process was before that and then how it has changed after that. So I'm very optimistic that's going to come in pretty soon. That window will become much more robust.
Which means the sophistication of what the AI models can, like people think that they're thinking. All they're doing is predicting a group of words based on a group of words you've given it. And in some ways it's a hack, but it is getting so powerful. That's all we do as humans, right? We talk in words and we respond with words, but it is getting so powerful. And that is going to be interesting to see how it will evolve.
Yeah.
Because we don't know yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And smaller models, both are very interrelated. So these are areas that I'm optimistically looking forward to.
Yeah, interesting. Last question. What is one piece of advice that you would give to somebody who wants to start a business?
Oh boy. Don't.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
No, it's hard and it's a grind. It's incredibly rewarding. I would say focus on things that people will pay for. It sounds really simple, but people have ideas that they pursue. I said, who would ever buy that? And this stuff comes out of Silicon Valley all the time. Like at the end of the day, people paying for something is more important than what the idea is. It really is. There's a lot of poor ideas that people paid for and really successful businesses were built. There's a lot of great ideas that they could never figure out how to sell it. And those are in the big dustbin of failed startups.
That's a good point.
To me, obviously, focus is number one. Also, execution. So along with focus, get ready to execute it, right? Like you can come up with ideas every day. There are, like I said, there are opportunities everywhere. It is execution that sets you apart from all others.
Absolutely. Ideas are really cheap and easy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Manoj and I are both idea people. We love to talk about ideas, but nobody buys ideas.
Yeah. I want to thank Cory and Manoj for joining us on the podcast today. If you want to see the full recording, we're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you want to learn more about Mojo AI or Safety Mojo, take a look at www.getmojo.ai. Thanks and be safe out there.